This is a posting from February 22nd, which the late night, last night, or yesterday afternoon, there were postings from Q, and also there were postings later on. I have delayed in taking care of it because I wanted to see how it followed through, and indeed there were postings after early this morning. So let me just go through these. There's a bunch of stuff. One was stay tuned. 791 is stay tuned. Everything has a meaning or purpose at Jack Getting Nervous. Jack Dorsey again. Twitter, phase 2, which in a kill box, which means either that they're into phase 2, they're done with phase 2, who knows? And who of us would know what phase 2 is? They note in 792 the gun that was found, as some of you may know, in Mar-a-Lago by the Secret Service for one of the van drivers. They removed all the van drivers and reversed them out. It says protect code went live, so they obviously were working overtime. There is some thought that this gun may have just been a way of testing the Secret Service to see if it was awake, to see if they could get away with stuff. There is some linkage to obviously Army intelligence, and perhaps that it was aiding the Secret Service. The code signals are clean, which may mean God knows what. We are moving up the timetable, and this is an important thing because many of us have speculated that as the squeeze comes on, the dark folks are going to get more and more desperate, and they're going to take more desperate measures, and certainly finding a gun among the van drivers of the president is such a move, such a concern. So as the desperation sets in, they may have to move faster and faster. And for those of us who have been skeptical about the whole Q thing, as I have said numerous times, it's chicken or feather. So if this is real, then obviously things are going to move faster, and there's some reason to believe that. The next one, 793, links the deep dream with Twitter, which has to do with the whole what's real and what isn't kind of game, and linking it to Twitter, which I would guess has to do with how does Twitter see the real world, and does Twitter see itself being able to formulate the real world. And then a big post, at Jack thought he was protected, no sleep since drop, task 3 to remove followers in drip order and restrict. Again, it has to do with Dorsey and linking him to the deep dream game, whatever you want to call it. And then 3 could either be Pelosi, which has been at some time, or could be that they're getting rid of 3 people, or trying to get rid of 3 people, and that could include Barlow. It could also relate to phase 2 and phase 3, and to go after them. It says hot in DC, no sleep, stay tuned. So I'm thinking that the hot has more to do with the political environment or with being hunted than the weather. So 794 says protect 6/14/46, which is the president's birthday, from number 788, which was the posting at which Q posted it. I was really curious about it. Q responds with coincidence, ? Which of course means it's not, or at least it's probably not. And at first I thought, what does 788 mean? Is it like 187? Is this the penal code? Whatever. Well, it turns out 788 refers to the Dallas Police Department file 788 regarding the JFK assassination. So what they're doing is saying if we're protecting the president from assassination, then 788 was referencing JFK and protecting him from assassination. And again, we have this kind of alignment. So 795 has to do with AG Sessions, U.S. Cyber Task Force, important. Jeff Sessions announced in the last day or two that that they would be using a cyber task force to find out what they needed to know about any kind of Russian collusion and Russian involvement, and the task force would be linked to the Department of Justice, according to the Attorney General, and that this is important. You know, it's probably either real important or it's important politically. Who knows which it is. Number 796 is the definition of a patriot and a traitor, and of course most of us are patriots and we think that way, we work that way, and the traitors are a person who betrays another, a cause, or any trust, a person who commits treason by betraying his or her country, and obviously we have been looking at a lot of this kind of stuff. The next posting, which is 798, says Delta 6 conference comms good operational. Many of you have pointed out that that Delta is one of the areas on Gitmo. So is that what we're talking about? And the 6 conference, you know, does that relate to it? And finally, there are 2 postings that have to do with archives of government files. And Q says, why are these publicly declassified documents highly protected? Well, let me tell you why they are, because I have looked at both of them. The first one begins in, it was released or was originally filed in 1977. It goes from 73 to 77. It has to do with a news article that was in the Washington Star, having to do with journalists doubling as CIA folks. There were a series of exchanges between Walter Fauntleroy, who is a member of the House of Representatives, and Admiral Stanfield Turner, who was at the time Director of Central Intelligence, and referencing William Colby, who was the predecessor of Stanfield Turner. And there are lots of discussions about how many people might be involved as journalists in working with the CIA. And of course, they started out with this fascinating stuff. They started out with 51 people that were at various levels. They got down to 30, so the story changed as they went along. They were using staff journalists and stringers and staff members and treating them as separate groups, and of course they tried to minimize it. There's also a conversation that Director Colby undertook to try to get the Washington Star not to report the matter. The committee, you know, this is so annoying because there's such deference, such cordiality between the Congress and the CIA that everybody says, oh gee, you know, don't let us interfere. So we've got Congressman Fauntleroy saying, you know, the committee has no plans to call reporters to probe their coverage, said Fauntleroy. I do have a personal interest in finding out whether certain reporters have another purpose other than dissemination of the news to the public. And one of the things they were concerned about was the ongoing House investigation of the Kennedy assassination. And Fauntleroy wanted to know if any of the people who were covering the JFK assassination and the committee work were also being paid by the CIA, which might be covering up what it was that happened. So there were suspicions even at the time. And of course what happened is, and this is really interesting, because Stanfield Turner writes a series of letters, and in this declassified material we see how internally they changed the content of it so that he parses his words. If you think that Clinton defining the word is was the first politician or department insider, government employee to play games with words, you'd have to read this, because what Stansfield Turner does is says, gosh, you know, we would never do this, and we don't use newsmen or churchmen, which was part of the thing based upon Martin Luther King. They were also looking into the assassination of King and whether or not clergymen were also doubled up as CIA agents. And they say, you know, we have no intention of doing this. We're not going to tell you who it is. We're not going to tell you what our policy is. We're not going to tell you how many people are involved. We're certainly not going to tip anybody off as to who it is. But beware that, you know, we only use it in the most extreme circumstances. And in this circumstance, they also went on to say, gosh, you know, what could possibly happen to all these people if they were outed internationally? And, you know, we could have people in the Peace Corps, Fulbrighters, USIA, USAID, you know, all of these people, there could be negative repercussions. So please, you know, we need the most positive reporting on it. So that's the one that's in 73 to 77. The second one is the CIA's use of journalists and clergy in intelligence operations. And guess what? This is the Senate, not the House. And this has to do with a discussion that was ongoing that occurred in 1996. So this is 20 years later. And we're having the same discussion with Director Deutsch of the CIA and Arlen Specter. And so what I need to, first of all, kind of tip you off to, because this is part of the game, right? This is the game that's being played. We think that what's going on here is a serious discussion between Director Deutsch and the Senate Investigating Committee that's looking at intelligence operations. Well, who's the chairman of the Senate? Arlen Specter. Well, what does Arlen Specter have to do with it? Well, Arlen Specter died in 2012 and was born in 1930. He was a Pennsylvania senator. He was a Democrat for a time and then a Republican for a time, and then finally switched to be a Democrat again, and that caused him to lose his Senate seat, I think, in 2011, shortly before he died. But he was also, this is the key part of it, he served as assistant counsel for the Warren Commission investigating the assassination of John F. Kennedy and helped devise the, quote, single bullet theory. So, interestingly, he was working with, and the person with whom he was working most closely was one of the 9 members on the Warren Commission, who happened to be Gerald Ford, Congressman Gerald Ford from Michigan at the time. And why is that noteworthy? Well, it's noteworthy because Gerald Ford's work, I surmise, at being such a good boy on the Warren Commission, got him appointed as vice president to replace Spiro T. Agnew in the Nixon administration. They got rid of Spiro just in time to get rid of Nixon, so they had Gerald in behind it. So this committee has to do with Director Deutsch responding, and a variety, including Terry Anderson, newsman, and Ted Koppel, newsman, along with Edelman, who happened to be the head of one of the news agencies. And again, here's what it goes. You know, Deutsch is saying, well, gosh, we need these exceptional waivers, and we can't tell you what we might use it for, but the CIA might need exceptional waivers where we would never interfere. The CIA would never interfere with news people or clergymen. We're still talking about clergymen. But, you know, in special areas, we might have hostages or terrorists. And if we had hostages or terrorists, then we would have to override any exceptions that we would have to interfering with our news people. And gosh, we might have to use them. And of course, it also excludes, and they throw this in, it excludes any newsman who might be voluntarily just helping us out or giving us information. So as, you know, here's Terry Anderson, and let me just give you a little quote from him. It will certainly make life much more difficult for our colleagues and me. It will. And he goes on to say that there is an ethical intelligence problem with jumping back and forth between the CIA and also being a newsman. And Ted Koppel talks about the fact that he recognizes that news people overseas are intelligence finders. They're trying to find all the things that they can. They're fact finders. And coupled with that, the CIA wants to find out facts. Well, Koppel says, well, coincidentally, you know, we give our information to everybody, and sometimes it includes the CIA because we get information that this might be beneficial to the CIA. So Director Deutsch responds by saying, well, gee, there are guidelines, and in the House they've already passed a rule which would require the president to grant exceptions, and the exceptions would have to be limited. We think in the CIA, and I think as director, that those guidelines are ones that we should describe and we should put together and we should oversee and we should grant the exceptions, and you just need to trust us. And so Terry Anderson goes back and says, basically, look, you know, if we have to trust you, then where are we? Then we don't know where we are. And one of the distinctions that was made in this is between overseas people, which is where the CIA is supposed to be, and in-country people, that is, people within the United States reporting the news. Perhaps it is, I would surmise again, that there is necessary linkage from time to time of overseas reporters, news people, that would have some linkage with the CIA or other intelligence. When is it appropriate for the CIA to be giving benefits to people sitting behind a desk as I am, giving news of the day from Washington, D.C. or in New York? And we all know at this point that that's going on. It is large scale and perhaps the exclusive source of much of the information we're getting. So what has to happen is a total breakdown in this situation. And what also has to happen, as most have pointed out, and as John F. Kennedy pointed out in the 1960s, we need to break the CIA into 1,000 pieces and toss it into the wind. So that's the report for the day. Thank you so much for your support. Give a thumbs up if you like it. I tried to get into depth about where we are on these things. You can find printouts of them. One of the things that has gone on lately is because the Q location is getting so over trafficked, they've been shutting it down except when there are postings. It's on for a bit. I will attempt to attach these latest postings to the bottom of my video so that you can see them in case it goes dark again. And I will also, and you will see in that the linkage to the two sources, the House committee meeting and the exchanges and the Senate hearing. So thank you so much. Subscribe if you like. Hit the bell so that you might possibly find out that I'm there, although clearly YouTube is making it difficult, and like many others on Twitter and elsewhere, I've been watching my membership, my subscribers jump up and down, and sometimes there'll be 10 or 20 subscribers that disappear within a few minutes if I check it, and then it comes back, of course. But it's the weirdest thing, and some of you have reported to me that you have been unsubscribed, and also that you have that you're unable to get the notifications. So what's going on? You know, I'm not that big a deal, but obviously there's some people that are being impacted in other situations. Thanks so much for watching.